Hello there. Um, we're back in the great outdoors for a slightly unconventional edition of Love at First Right. Unconventional only because we're having it in the great outdoors, but I am cooped up in my office because there is still quarantine underway for the coronavirus, and so I've been trying to get out as much as possible, which I'm sure all of you have. So I'd love going into my backyard, which I did today for this, to talk about what I really want to talk about, which is God. I found this quote in the Paris Review, which I follow on Twitter, and it was, gosh, I can't even remember the author who said it, but it was have affection for the growth of your characters. And I did a Writing on the Brink, which is sort of my snippet version of Love at First Right, where I just sort of give quick thoughts about how I'm feeling about what I'm writing today. And, I post it on YouTube and on Instagram and such. And I did a little Writing on the Brink about having affection for the growth of your characters, but I just think this is a topic that really deserves a longer form discussion. And just as a little aside, this was terrific. I learned this just the other day from one of my Cold War friends, my Cold War obsessed friends. The Paris Review was started by an author and CIA operative named Peter Matheson, who actually used agency funds to start the Paris Review, which I just think is fantastic, especially for someone who writes Cold War historical thrillers like me. But back to the topic at hand. Quick reintroduction. I'm Victoria Doherty. I'm a fiction and essay writer, and I have written Cold War historical thrillers, as I said, and now I am just launching this epic fantasy historical romance style series, which I just love, and which has just been so much fun to write. And the teaser novella Savage Island came out in October and is available on Amazon. And Breath, the first big book in this epic series, will be coming out towards the end of May. So this is stuff that I've just been thinking about a lot. I want to tell you a little bit about an experience I had when I wrote my first novel, The Bone Church, which was a historical thriller that took place in World War II and the Cold War. And I had a really interesting experience writing my female protagonist. I had a male and a female protagonist in this, which, when I started out writing it, they each had sort of equal footing. It was their story. And as I was shopping it around, and my agent rather was shopping it around, and it was going to the various New York publishing houses. This was before the days of indie publishing. What was really fascinating to me was how very differently men and women responded to my female protagonist. Both responded pretty equally and favorably to the man, but to the woman, her name was Magdalena. Women were fascinated by her. One of the sort of, I think she was an agent or she was an assistant, I can't remember, at the David Black agency, wrote to me, and she said, and this was, I was turned down from this agency when I was still looking for an agent, that is. She said, I love this, but I want it to be all about Magdalena. And I got that response from several different women, how much they loved that character and they found her really interesting. And from the men, it was just the opposite. The agent I did finally end up working with instantly said, you need to paint her with smaller strokes. She's unlikable. She's interesting, but she's unlikable. And after the book came out, a really good friend of mine who is just this incredible reader and this, incredibly smart and interesting man, the first thing he said to me, I didn't even ask him, he's like, I love the book. I hated Magdalena. God, she was awful. And I just thought that was so funny because I didn't think she was awful at all, She was complicated. she had been hardened by life. I think she started out as a much more, classically sympathetic character. But I also wasn't writing her as a traditional romantic heroine. And I think that when you are writing a more conventional romantic heroine for a genre that requires a more traditional romantic heroine, I think you have to tread more carefully and perhaps write your female characters and your male characters a little bit differently and more to genre. And I had this really on my mind for this epic fantasy romance series because I was writing a more traditional heroine, and I knew that, and I was writing for people who loved historical romance, who loved epic fantasy, and who also loved reading books where the romantic relationship between the two main characters is central to the story in a way that it is perhaps not in a spy thriller. I mean, it's certainly important in something like a spy thriller or a historical spy thriller in my case in what I write, but it's not the same. You can afford to have a slightly unlikable heroine in a spy thriller. You can afford to have people who are incredibly complicated because these are cloak and dagger stories. They're shaded gray. And when you venture into certain other genres, I wouldn't say that there are not shades of gray. That's not accurate, but you do have to think carefully about what readers of that genre want from the book that you're writing, and you need to bring that together with your own vision for the characters and with your own vision for the story, and hope that you do so artfully, because like something like Game of Thrones is of course high fantasy, and you can have terrible and really complicated characters, but it does not have the added, while it has plenty of romances in it, it does not have the added sort of genre specification of a romance or a historical romance. And when you're combining genres the way I am, that's something that you have to keep in mind. And it has been quite a journey, and it's not easy to. You never want what they call a Mary Sue, right? A Mary Sue being a character who's just too perfect. She always does the right thing. You can put her on a pedestal. That's not a real person. And you always want to have a character who is just flawed enough, but not so flawed that you turn off the reader, and the reader, like my friend and like my agent, right? And like the woman at the agency that I was telling you about, or actually not like her. She loved her, but it is especially complicated when you want to have respect for the growth of your characters, affection for the growth of your characters. You want them to have a proper story arc of starting one way and ending up a different way. And in romances, oftentimes, though not always, the female character, she does not start out flawed from her character. She is more a diamond in the rough character who comes into her own. And I think that's actually one of the great things about the genre. That's a wonderful thing. But I wanted to test that a little. I wanted to take that a little further because I didn't want my main character to just be a diamond in the rough who comes into her own. I wanted her to have some flaws, and real flaws, character flaws that she overcomes and has to struggle with the way we struggle. And yet I had to be very careful about not making them not making her too rough around the edges, not making her someone that the reader would stop sympathizing with and would not feel they would not feel that they had been delivered the sort of experience they expect from a story that is romantic in nature. Because, of course, our characters, when we're writing a romance, they do have to be somewhat romanticized. You know, the male character is a hero, you know, and has an outsized sense of courage and an outsized sense of heart. And similarly, the female character has to have those qualities. And yet, if you are interested in bringing some more artistry to it and interested in perhaps infusing other genres into it, then you have to tread very delicately. But at the same time, you want that to be there. You know, you want your reader to watch this character grow and become a stronger person, a better person. And if you make her a harder person, then you have to, I think, or him, soften him or her in another area of their character. In my case, you know, my female protagonist, and I'm focusing on the females because those are the ones that I have a particular problem with, obviously, when I'm endeavoring to write this sort of character, since I tend to be, you know, since in the past I've tended to be ultra realistic. I think that, you know, my character definitely, she goes through some horrific events. I mean, truly, a war, a plague, brutal physical attacks on her person. And she has she also, you know, she is a character who dies and is reborn through many lives and lives throughout history, with her, you know, and her male lover is also one of these divine beings, you know, these Ninti, I call them, in the story. And so, you know, with this first life, she does have these very hardening experiences, and I've just been trying to be very, very careful with making it so they give her wisdom and strength, I think, but not hardening her heart. Because to me, I think, I hope I'm right, right? Because my entire series depends upon it. But I think that, for me at least, the way to bring reality, to have affection for the growth of my character in this genre, which has very specific requirements for her character, I'm trying to keep her heart open and as soft as possible, while at the same time not only showing that she cannot be destroyed, but that this sort of open-heartedness will be a strength of hers, as well as the sort of hardening of her courage and of her mental strength, of her physical strength, of and I mean constitutional strength, not literally like, you know, superhero strength. I think that is the path forward, and is what makes in this genre a truly compelling character that a reader will love. So that's the hope, at least, right? And readers will tell me if I've succeeded, and if I haven't, I will endeavor to keep trying. Thanks. See you next time, and enjoy the day.